So first we have to establish which strings are attributed to which pegs. This is important because you don't want the wrong strings on the wrong pegs. So the easiest way is to face your instrument, and for violin, imagine counterclockwise from the bottom right to the left. Right is bright. That's how you remember this. Right being the E string. Bottom right, E string, and then A string. And then you go to the left side, the top left is D string, and then G string. And so for viola, this would be A, D, G, and then C string. But before we get to changing your strings, you have to learn how to tune. So if you don't know how to do that yet, check out this other video that I made where I go in depth about how to tune and how to determine which pitch is higher versus lower. Now let's get to removing the string.
Okay, let's go.
So one important thing to keep in mind is that you only ever change one string at a time. Don't want to be changing all 4 or 2 strings. That can endanger the bridge and move it aside or make it collapse even. And also keeping an eye on the bridge, where if you're looking at it, the back, that means the side that's facing the tailpiece, is straight. And then the front, which is facing the fingerboard, is slightly curved. That's just the shape of the bridge. So you want to set your instrument in your lap facing towards you, and then we're going to remove the A string. So you start by turning the peg towards you. So this means counterclockwise if you're looking at it from the right side. But that means that if you're changing the D string or the G string or the lower strings on the viola, you want to also turn it towards you, which means actually clockwise if you're looking at it towards the scroll. So like I said, we're going to detune the A string. So we're going to start by unwinding the peg. And after a while, you'll notice that, oh, this is actually quite easy. It might get stuck in the beginning, but make sure that you're tuning it. One quick way to also double check whether or not you're turning in the right direction, because some pegs might head on incorrectly, is to look at the winding. Are you increasing the slack? If so, then you're turning the right direction. All right, so now that we've loosened the string considerably, you can remove the string from the peg so that it's completely off. And then remove it from the tailpiece easily by pulling this way. Off it goes. Now, if you're changing any one of the lower 3 strings, which on the violin would be the A, D, or the G, you want to grab a pencil or something that has graphite, and then gently just color in the ridge on the bridge, as well as the ridge here on what's known as the nut. This will ensure that the string doesn't unravel at these 2 points, which could then, lead to damaging your string, which means more strings that you'll have to purchase, which are expensive. So there we go, we've colored it in and we're ready to apply the new string. It's an exciting time when you apply a new string, taking the string out, unraveling it. So first thing you want to do is loop the string through the hole in the peg. So there you go. Once it's in, make sure that you loop it in a little bit more than is necessary. So you can sort of adjust that by wiggling the peg around. And then, once it's in, you can start to turn it. Remember, for the A string, the strings on the right, the higher strings, you want to turn it away from you. So that is clockwise. Notice that when you're turning it, you want to thread it so that the colored part, the winding part, is as close, is going towards the right side if you're changing it on the right side, and left if you're changing it on the left. This will ensure that this peg is less likely to unravel when you're tuning it. Once you've had the winding up against the nut, you don't want to overwind this too much. That's usually the indication of when then you can start to put the ball end through the tailpiece. So this part is a little bit tricky. So I like to lay down the instrument here, and then with my other finger, go from behind the tailpiece and then hold on to the ball end. So sometimes the winding on the other end can be a little bit too thick. You might need to force it through a little bit, but this ensures that you have that leverage to do so. And then you can start to, with your other hand, continue holding the ball end and then wind up the A string. Okay, so we're at the point where the ball end is still in, it's not slipping out, and we want to make sure that the string is correctly in the groove. There have been many times when I have accidentally created a new ridge on the bridge, which you don't want to do. And then we want to start slowly tightening it. Now, as you tighten, you want to push against the peg so that it doesn't just unwind after you wind it up. We're going to wind it very, very slowly, half a turn. You can see, and then you want to be tuning as you go. I can tell that this is still a D, and then you want to tune up a little bit more. We want to get to A, right? La. So we're going to wind up a little bit more. We're getting close now. You want to get close, but not too close. And for those of you who might be starting out and you have fine tuners, this is where I would recommend that you start using your fine tuner. But for those of you who don't have a fine tuner, that's when you can start getting a little bit closer, maybe a little bit closer for those even with fine tuners. There we go. And I like to just make sure that the bridge, again, isn't tilting forward, because you can imagine that with all that weight of the string, it's going to pull the bridge forward. So you want to make sure that it is just right. If it's not, for those of you who are beginners, please take it to your teacher or to your local violin shop to make sure that they adjust it. Otherwise, you can very carefully adjust the bridge yourself, but only if you have experience. And then the next step is to tune your instrument. how you would normally tune it. So with fine tuners or with the pegs. All right, so what we just went through applies to any of the lower 3 strings. However, if you are changing your E string on the violin, that's a little different. So forget what I said about the pencil. This time we are going to unravel the E string, and you can consider removing what's called the sleeve if there is one. There's usually a plastic sleeve here. You can remove by unthreading it through the string, like so. That is especially important if you already have a parchment, but if you don't, then you need to keep it on because it's what protects your bridge from your E string, otherwise it will just cut straight through. Now to the tricky part. This is removing the ball end from the loop, especially if you have a loop end E string. Let's talk a little bit about why you would want to have a loop end E string tuner. It's because loop and E string tuners have a brighter and more brilliant sound. And when you're a violinist, that E string, when you're playing the high passages, that's the one thing that you want to have, is to make sure that your E string can soar over the sound of the orchestra, over the pianist, over everyone. You just want to just blast that sound right through to the ends of the earth. So that's when you can remove this and consider using a loop end E string. And the way I like to do it is to hold as close to the ball end as I can with my left hand. And then with my right hand, grab it, pinch it, and then force it through like that. Easy peasy. And then same method applies. Loop it through the peg, turn it away from you, put it on the loop end, and then there you go. You have successfully put on your E string. Remember, do not over-tune it. Start to use your tuner once you get close. The last thing you want to do is snap. And also, I like to do this thing where I like actually turn away my face as I'm tuning it, just because I have this phobia that the string is going to snap in my face. All right, so you successfully learned how to change your A, D, G, and as well as your E string, but your job is not over yet. The next part is to let your strings settle in. This is important because strings will stretch over time. This usually can take up to a week if you don't practice, or the easiest way to do it is to practice. And speaking of practice, I want to share with you this app that I've been working on over the past few years that helps people improve and enjoy their practicing. Because if you're someone like me where you find it kind of difficult to focus on your own, but then suddenly it's easier when others are around, then Tonic is definitely something for you to check out. It's kind of like the musical equivalent of going to the gym or library to study. It can track your practicing, and you can join groups and communities where you can ask others questions like, which string should I use? And for those of you who are really shy, don't worry, we got you. You can start by listening to others practice to receive free practice inspiration. The best part about it, it's completely free. So sign up using the link in my description or scan this QR code on the screen right now. And so that's it for basic string changing. Now, over the course of my professional career, I've been asked a lot of questions around strings. So here are the top ones. The first question is, which strings do you use? And I like to use the Dynamos. These ones are by Tomastic. They're a really great string. They just recently came out with them. I really like them because there's this like gradient of colors. Some strings, when you play them, they're either on or off, or they change the timbre of your instrument. But these ones just sort of enhance it. And it has a really, really good dynamic range. The next question is, how often do you change your strings? Honestly, I change my strings quite often, usually between every 10 to 15 concerts, which might be as little as 2 weeks. It might be as long as 2 months. But when I was a student, I definitely changed them far, far less. I probably changed them only like once, maybe twice a year, or right before a competition. So this leads to the third question. When is it best to change your strings? Well, like we established, strings do take time to stretch and settle so that you don't have to keep constantly retuning them. So I like to recommend usually 2 to 3 days before your important concert or gig or competition, which gives you time to settle the strings and practice on them. The only exception to this rule might be the E string, which only takes a few hours to settle before you don't have to constantly retune them. So now that you know everything there is to changing strings, you can go ahead and start practicing, and you can do that by yourself, or you can share your wonderful new sound with others on Tonic. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.